Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Bauman. I'm CAI's Senior Vice President of Government and Public Affairs. Welcome and thank you. I'm in Washington, D.C., along with my colleagues Phoebe Nesseth and Tom Skiba. Tom is CAI's Chief Executive Officer, and he was able to join us today, which is fabulous. So it's good morning from us, good afternoon to all of you. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. We also have joining us AJ van Rensburg, who is an attorney in South Africa, whom I'm sure you all know well, and Johan Kruger, who is a community association or a state manager in South Africa, who you also know well of both of their experiences. We are really grateful for them joining us today and for all of you joining us today to talk about some of these really challenging issues related to estates and coronavirus, COVID-19. We've been talking, Community Associations Institute, we've been talking over the past couple of months about what community associations, estates are facing right now relative to common areas and levies and enforcing rules and covenants and essential workers, a lot of these topics that are coming up that we never thought we would have to deal with. So we thought we would talk with all of you today, share some information, share some ideas on what's happening in South Africa, as well as what's happening here in the United States. The purpose of today's call, while AJ is a brilliant attorney and my colleague Phoebe is also a brilliant attorney, but the purpose of today's call is not to provide you with legal advice because we don't have the specific circumstances of your estate and your communities, but it's just intended to provide you with some information for your toolbox to help you and your communities and your estates make decisions as you continue to navigate these circumstances created by COVID-19. The first part of this program, we will go through some questions that we've been hearing from you, that we've been hearing from others here in the US and around the world. We'll share some of those questions and responses. And then we'll ask you to raise your hand or pose a question in our question box so that we can answer those questions. If you look at the control panel on your computer, you'll be able to see a questions box. Click that questions box, pose a question to us, and we will answer those questions for you. We'll share them with the group and answer those questions. If you have any technical questions, you can also send questions there, and we'll hope to be able to answer those technical questions for you. Phoebe, are there any technical questions right now that we need to address?
No, not at this point in time. Again, feel free to submit your questions, and I think we're good to start, Dawn.
Okay, sounds great. All right, AJ, Tom, and Johan, and be patient with us because we're all doing this from, different parts of the world, and we're trying to coordinate, make this seamless for all of you. But we're going to keep our microphones muted until it's our turn to talk. So just be patient with us, and we'll appreciate that. The first question that we're going to talk about today is, are community managers and board members encouraging residents to wear face masks or cloth coverings in their communities? And if so, how are communities advising, how are boards and managers advising their residents to do so? AJ?
Thanks, Dawn. I just want to firstly highlight again, this is like toolbox advice. It's not a legal view, as you've rightfully said. Community managers should really encourage exactly when members leave their dwellings or houses to wear protective face masks, gloves, etc., because it will support the purpose of the limitation of the spread of the virus. And it should really be promoted to a high level.
Johan, do you have anything to add, or Tom or Phoebe, anything to add?
Well, in the U.S., it really wasn't until about 2 weeks ago that the advice changed from there's no need to wear a mask to we want people to wear a mask at all times when they're out of their when they're outside their home, when they're potentially out in public. Honestly, the pickup here in the U.S. has been scattered for that. If you go to a local grocery store, you'll probably see maybe half the people wearing masks and half not. But the government is trying to encourage people to do that. I think what's slowed down the uptake is that they weren't encouraging it until about 2 weeks ago. They basically said it didn't matter, and suddenly it matters. So, I think within the context of a community, particularly if you have people sharing space within the community, even though you may have your amenities closed, it's certainly a good reminder, whether to post signs or other, other reminders through email or your internal messaging systems, website, et cetera, to encourage people to do that. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. But if you look at the statistics, it does reduce the probability of transmission, and anything we can do to do that is beneficial to the entire community, not just to one individual.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on. This is an issue that I know everyone is dealing with, and this is related to common areas. The clubs, the clubhouse, the gym, the golf courses, other common areas and common facilities. So how are, AJ and Johan, how are communities, estates handling those closures and enforcing those closures within the community?
Hi, Dawn. Thank you very much. And I would like to start off to thank you and Phoebe and Tom for your time. When we had a brief discussion about 2 weeks ago, this really excited me to be able to connect with you guys in the States and hear how you guys are doing it over there, and maybe also get some more international perspective. So the common areas has probably been the hot topic in South Africa, especially around cycling and walking. And our approach has been, as we take directive from government, you're not allowed to. Most of the estates where they've got clubhouses, they've shut them down. Golf courses are shut down. We only allowed minimal maintenance on greens and fairways. Some of the estates don't even cut their common areas. Estate where I stay at got permission to cut their lawns, house gardens, starting from yesterday. So we don't enforce it as estate managers, because it is, after all, the South African Police Service's responsibility, but we support it. We've had instances where we did call out the police to assist us in the policing of it, and they've been helpful. Where I stay, for instance, we've got a WhatsApp group with the police and ask for direction, ask for assistance, and they've really helped us to date on that.
Tom, you want to share how we're handling it here in the U.S.?
Well, certainly we've had, we're seeing either by government order or common sense, most community associations are closing their public spaces, their amenities, their club rooms, et cetera. What's been interesting is, and you mentioned golf, Johan, in some states in the U.S., golf is still permitted. Where we live, where Dawn and I and Phoebe live here in Virginia, the golf courses are still open. They've changed some of the rules, so it's one player to a cart. It is they've removed all of the all the things that you would touch in a round of golf. The flag stick, the flag stick stays in the hole. They've actually covered the hole, so if you hit the flag stick, the ball is considered in. But they've made every effort to keep courses open. We are keeping most of the public spaces open, although a lot of parks are closed. Things that people touch, where they're going to be in close proximity. Playgrounds for children are closed because you can't keep children 6 feet apart from one another, and you can't keep them all from touching the same materials. But a walking path or a bicycling path, those are going to be open in a lot of places in the U.S. The biggest challenge we have is that there's no one set of rules. There's no one set of guidance. Every single state in the United States has both a different underlying law governing the states and a different set of emergency orders that's been issued by their governor. So what Dawn and I and Phoebe can experience in Virginia, we can drive 10 minutes away across the river into Maryland, and the rules may be completely different.
Yeah, the
AJ.
golf courses here are shut. Sorry, Dawn. And you'll see now on all the Facebook pages of the golf courses, they're doing virtual coaching, and we've even been asked to refrain from posting pictures of our beautiful golf courses because it sends out the wrong image. But
they don't want people to feel bad about it.
Well, that's the thing, and you know the situation in South Africa. But Tom, I can tell you what, if you want to play golf, you must come to South Africa in the next 3 weeks, because every single golf course is in a top notch. We've had good rains, and it looks beautiful.
And there's no one on.
You can't play it.
And there's no one on the course, so the play will be fast.
Yeah, we've even had committee members that volunteer to mow the lawn and ride ons just to get out. But it's a hot topic at the moment. Golf courses closed, So, but hopefully next week, Friday, we'll know tomorrow night, but next week, Friday, we might open with restrictions that for instance, they've got in the States.
Okay. Dawn, it is a extremely contentious issue at the moment. And I get asked this question very frequently. In respect of our two scenarios of residential communities, homeowners associations and sectional title units, which you know as condominiums. One is regulated by the Companies Act and the other one has got a specific act that was written for it. But the golden thread for both those scenarios are the promotion of safety and security of the members or residents of those setups. And when we look at the safety of our members, their children, their workers, etc., it goes without saying that we are in control of the common areas by default as a result of the constitution or legislation. So in that respect, the regulation of the common areas also is a challenge. Johan has shared today with me directives that a statutory body that was created in South Africa, the Community Schemes Ombuds Service, have now taken the initiative to issue directives in respect of common areas, and it's strict. It's a no-go zone. So we'll put it on the case of the local Facebook and website so that it can be accessed for estate management and board as well. But the regulation, as I said, is a challenge. Some board members say, well, it's the duty of the authorities to now arrest those people that are on the common areas. Some scenarios, when I say some scenarios, some estate managers have taken hands with the authorities, the security service providers, and they jointly police this for the benefit of all concerned. So yes, common areas is a contentious issue, but if they ask me, rather close it down so we can stop the spread of the disease.
And that's what we're seeing a lot here in the US as well. The associations, their boards and their managers do have authority to enforce the closures of their common elements. But when it comes to walking around the community, that's where they don't have the authority. So most of the stay-at-home orders in the states, in each of the states here, allow people to get out and exercise as long as they're social distancing. But even if they're not social distancing, an association wouldn't take it upon themselves to enforce that in their community. What they are enforcing is closures for common areas. So closing the pool, closing the gym, closing the clubhouse and things like that. Let's move to the health and safety issue that you've talked about, which is trying to, what is the board's duty to act to reduce the contamination in the community? So from sanitation and other measures, what are your boards and estate managers doing in South Africa to ensure that that contamination is reduced?
Dawn, at the moment, the traffic at the gates are low, if I can express it this way, because of the national lockdown. This morning I shared with a estate manager that she has reached out to the security service provider to put sanitization, masks, gloves, etc. At the gate. But then she asked me also the question, who gets one of the facilities will be a quick test to see whether you've got a high temperature, whether you may have the virus, you know, like a spot check. And then she asked me, so who do we test and who do we don't? I said, well, it's simple. The virus don't choose its victims. It goes male, female, black, yellow, white, doesn't matter. So you need to be strong on this, Mrs. Estate Manager. Whether you are the state resident or whether you are the housekeeper for a member, you will be tested before you enter the estate.
Does that mean you're restricting guests as well?
Dawn, the relaxation of our national lockdown will be announced tomorrow. It will be phased in. So we will see regulations being rolled out of Parliament and on the communication channels like it's going out of fashion. So we'll see how the movement of the public is phased in. And then when the gates are open for guests, it will be a time-consuming exercise. But as we are controlling the territory of the gated estate, I fear for the day that a visitor comes in that is contaminated. So coming back to this morning's conversation, if there's 50 visitors and we do quick tests on them just on temperature and whatever, and we identify 4 which may possibly be contaminated, we're doing a low percentage.
Anyone have anything to add?
Yeah, just to add on to AJ or your question in terms of the visitors, we've deactivated the visitor management system at most of the estates. So no visitors are allowed unless they fall in the regulations as published by the government. Either it's essential service, going shopping, those kind of things. So the community that I'm at, we've reduced the access lanes from something like 12 to 2. You know, so no visitors allowed. No visitors can. You can't generate a code. You know the setup at our estates. And our big thing from the boards, even when we went into the partial lockdown 2 weeks prior, was to sanitize, especially the biometric readers, because that was quite a sensitive area. You know, to put your finger on and the guy after you and the guy after you. So the guards were standing there with wipes and sanitizers to keep those areas clean.
Well, you know, that's certainly an advantage you have in most of the estates, Johan, is that you already have a significant security structure in place. You have a significant access control structure in place. Most estates in the U.S. don't have. And so you can turn it off. You can close those gates. You can, you know, you can do some things to manage non-resident access pretty easily. I was going to ask the question for you about all the other, you know, all the biometrics that your residents participate in, and so you already talked about, you know, cleaning those. What about other places within the community where even in a lockdown condition, people are going to pass through? Are there other areas that you're having to turn special attention to cleaning, to sanitation?
So Tom, in the beginning with the partial lockdown, especially the golf courses tried it with the golf bags, you know, and the flag sticks. But with the lockdown from 27th of March, it was actually quite easy because the regulations were clear. So it was a lockdown. We closed gyms, we closed the spa, we closed the restaurants, we closed the offices. Everybody worked remotely. So there was little gray in that sense, because you were not allowed to operate a restaurant unless it's an essential service at a say at an old age home or a hospital for that. So that in that sense has made it easy for us. But the whole access control system, and I mean, you well versed, or you know the systems that we've got in South Africa, that biometrics and the visitor management system, all those things was narrowed down, scaled down, locked down, you know, very, very limited. What the security service providers were very good at, they reacted quite quickly with the PPE, including the temperature. Although it's not the most sophisticated way, but from early on, we could take the temperature of the contractors, staff coming onto site, and things like that. It made a big difference.
And so just to clarify, you're taking the protocol right now is taking the temperature of staff and workers and contractors, not residents.
We don't do residents at all. Remember now, also construction has stopped, so there's no construction on estates. So if you talk about the levy and the budget, that's a you know, another impact, not just on the normal levy, but on the building fees and those things that we charge. So from early on, we did take temperatures of staff, contractors, and at the moment at the parades, you know, our guards stand parade at every shift. They stand there with their mask, with their gloves, and each one's temperature is taken. If I go to my community tomorrow, when I arrive at the gate, they'll take my temperature as well. That's protocol, but not residents. We don't do residents.
Should we talk about that for a minute? Should we talk about the essential workers? And so, Johan, can you go to your community tomorrow? Are you allowed?
So it is one of the hot topics. You know, state managers in South Africa are not deemed essential service. But there's a website that you can register as essential service. So I managed to register my HOA, and I can get the staff there, so I can travel. But if I've got to, you know, show the permit and show my driver's license when I go through a roadblock. And where I stay, I go through from province to province. So no, you're not allowed to. However, you know, if you register, you can. But estate managers in South Africa are not deemed to be an essential service at this stage, which I believe is a bit different there. Maybe you can.
It is. It is a bit different, and I'm going to explain that. I'm going to also defer to Phoebe to read some language that the Department of Homeland Security has put out, our federal department. So in the essential worker is defined in the stay-at-home orders, and the stay-at-home orders are made at the state level. So the governors make those stay-at-home orders. The federal Department of Homeland Security has drafted language for states to adopt. And many states have adopted this language that we believe, and most community association managers, condominium managers believe, qualify the work that is essential of an estate manager, community association manager, is actually qualified in those stay-at-home orders. Listen, if one of the jobs of the community association manager is to hold parades and events and organize golf outings and things like that, that part of their job is not essential. But we have a lot of condominiums, a lot of stratas, high-rise buildings that the community association manager manages the facilities in that building. And so they need to be there to be able to make sure those facilities are managed, the elevators, the heat, the water, things like that. And also, we still have landscaping going on. We still have outdoor maintenance, even pool maintenance, because our communities don't want to neglect our common areas. So they're still maintaining those common areas, even though they're not being used. They're maintaining them, they're sanitizing them. They want to, so all of those contractors are coming in and out of the community, and the community manager is working with those contractors, meeting those contractors. So I'm going to have my colleague Phoebe read the language that DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, has put out there that kind of is a catch-all for community managers. Go ahead, Phoebe.
Yeah, of course. So many states have used this federal language as their basis for their stay-at-home orders in essential language. It reads workers such as plumbers, electricians, exterminators, and other service providers who provide services necessary to maintaining the safety, sanitation, and essential operation of residences are considered essential workers. States have added to this as well. Some states have explicitly included property managers, landscapers, HVAC service providers. So it's been very helpful for us in our interpretation to allow our property managers on site during this time.
Yeah, and I think that if we'd known that in the beginning, you know, when they started, we could have been proactive. But what some of the, you know, it also differs from, well, so first of all, the landscaping guys don't work, or most of them. But what some of the service providers have been good at, they made provision in the beginning to let the guards and some of these landscape guys stay on the estate. So they provide them with accommodation, they stay on site, they don't need to travel. Again, very unique to South Africa. You know, most of those guys travel by taxi. And if you get 20 people in a vehicle, that's the big problem. So to mitigate those kind of things, the guys live on site. And to assist that they don't need to travel, you know.
Yeah, Dawn, to explain to you, currently based in Washington, we have a default position in South Africa. It is a national lockdown. You're not allowed to leave your premises unless you are identified in the regulations as being regarded essential services. Luckily, the regulations makes provision for a process where you can engage with the authorities to be recognized as an essential services, and then you've got your certificate to go and do your services, etc. So compared to your scenario, it's a challenge on this side. Phoebe, your heart will go out to me. I'm not even allowed to go to court. Attorneys are regarded as a nuisance, not as an essential service. So you do need to jump as an attorney also through a lot of hoops before you can get an official permit from your governing body to attend court for a simple bail application. So it is a challenging time.
And many of our courts are closed as well. So we do have that similarity. But there are some Zoom meetings being held in the courts. But for the most part, many of our courts are closed as well. Should we talk about board meetings and how associations are handling board meetings? Are states having board meetings? Are they meeting right now?
Dawn, on board level, it's we're fortunate to have electronic communication. So that method is there. When it comes to members' meetings, especially in homeowners association, there's the requirements of the Act, and then there's the constitution of the community scheme as well. And most of the community scheme constitutions do make provision for a quorum requirement in person. Now, that means that somebody needs to be physically there. The Act allows for participation via electronic communication, but all the participants needs to be active in the conversation concurrently. You're not allowed to talk via medium. So your participation in the meeting electronically is very direct. The Act also makes provision for round-robin meetings to be held. The downside is that the Act precludes round-robin meetings for something that is earmarked for an annual general meeting or the nomination of a director. So most of the meetings that are conducted by the community schemes are annual general meetings, and at that juncture they deal with all the little rats and mice as well, and that's something that the Act precludes. So lastly, the Act also does make provision for wrong to be right, made right in the future. So if the pandemic goes to a level where it's actually become impossible to hold a meeting in person, then it will be held electronically, and subsequently it will be ratified by a special resolution. The Act allows for that. What I'm trying to say is that the Act says that even if you act against your constitution, the members involved can, by a special resolution, then correct the wrong as well. So challenging times, but there's ways and avenues and legal avenues around the logistical issues that we've got.
Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about how some of the communities are handling meetings here in the States?
Sure. Obviously, it makes a difference where you are, and every state's law is a little bit different in terms of allowing. But we are seeing a lot of electronic meetings. You know, either Zoom or GoToWebinar, or lots of other tools being used for boards to meet. In many cases, we're seeing the annual general meetings being postponed, even if they're being postponed past a statutorily defined requirement date. For example, you know, you might have a requirement that board terms end on at a certain point. After 12 months, you have to elect a new board, and you're not going to have a meeting at that 12-month mark to elect a new board. The current board will continue until such time as you can actually bring people together, because you can't, you're stuck between the requirement of statute for the association law and an emergency order from the government saying you can't have people together in groups greater than 10, and they have to be 6 feet apart. And so it's just not practical. So I think we're going to see a lot of I remember a speech someone gave once, and it basically, the premise was, it's much easier to beg for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission. And so I think we're going to be in a situation where a lot of associations are in technical violation of statute, and they're going to have to beg for forgiveness from their members and from the government at some point. But if it's protecting people and their literally their lives, I think that's a reasonable excuse for asking for forgiveness in this situation.
And I think what we're seeing is a community association boards and managers documenting what they're doing, rationale for what they're doing, and making sure that they're approaching whatever it happens to be, meetings, making sure they're addressing it in a consistent way. So trying to make sure that they're just not making different decisions all the time for the same situation, trying to be consistent, document it, make resolutions so that they can share information with their residents about what they're doing. And I think that transparency and communication with residents is also super important. AJ, Johan, anything to add on board meetings and board action?
So some of my colleagues tell me that they constantly in board meetings because now suddenly everybody's got time. At my community, I like it, they're too busy. So I haven't had a board meeting, and that's the one advantage. You don't have to sit in meetings all the time, but it is a challenge. We had to postpone a EGM on a levy vote, and we had to go back to a CPI increase because it's only what the MOI allowed us. But you know what, it is what it is. We'll fix it later on.
Let's talk about levies a little bit. So one of the questions we get here in the United States is, why do I have to pay my levies when I don't have access to the golf course and to the clubhouse and the workout facilities. So why do I even have to pay my levies? Are you guys getting the same questions?
Yeah, we had a conversation, me and AJ, this morning on it. You know, this whole contractual obligation between a HOA and their members, and I'll let AJ talk a little bit on that. It's coming for us, Dawn, because month one was okay-ish, but in our case, we divided the levies up a little bit. There's your monthly annual assessment or your annual levy, and for 99% of the guys, it's not negotiable. There's one or two estates that I'm aware of that gave the guys like a 500 Rand for 3 months discount, you know, which obviously from our point of view, we don't encourage at all. Our challenge comes in with building levies, road maintenance fees, while the property is under construction, you know, and the owner pays, and when do you bill and not bill, and some of them we bill in advance, and some of them we bill in arrears, and then it's also got to do is the member in good standing. So it is a bit of a minefield, but the majority of the estates that I'm aware of, your levy, not negotiable. For the time that you can't build, we will negotiate or talk or reduce or give a discount or not charge the building fee, the penalties, and those kind of things. Also, you know, it is why we do reserves as well. You know, the reserves are there for emergencies and a rainy day. And it is where we now, you know, so for those estates that's cash flush with good reserves, you know, they can make a different decision as the estates that are really, really cash strapped and only got like 2 or 3 months of reserves in the accounts. They've got a challenge. But I'm not aware of any estates that stopped charging interest. That was discussed at some stage, that in this period, if a guy doesn't pay his levy, that you don't charge him the interest on the arrears. But there's some of them that I'm sure will not charge interest over, say, 2 or 3 months.
Yeah, Dawn, to come back to your question, coming from the member's mouth, while I didn't have the advantage of playing my round of golf and going to the communal areas or the recreational areas, so you say it's a contractual relationship, it's a two-way street, so I'm going to also now pay limited levies, etc. Luckily, in most of the memoranda, the constitutions of the scenario, residential scenarios, is a condition that you're not entitled to withhold payment of your dues as a member because of the obligation on the other side not have been met. Incidentally, for this past month, when we were in a national lockdown, I was asked to roll out a few legal views in respect of what is the effect on the contractual relationship if it's an action from a third party over which none of the parties have a control, such as the current pandemic. You know, does it suspend the obligations until a later date? What's the scenario? Now, it's a very tricky legal argument in the South African law, and it depends whether you did contract for it or not, failing which the common law may come to your assistance. But to answer the question, I want to be proactive. One of the financial consequences of the pandemic will be, whether we know it or not, a lot of people will lose their jobs. That is one of the realities of the consequences of this pandemic, which by default will have an effect on the income of the associations. I always profess, adopt a debtor policy. It is a policy, it's not the constitution, it's a moving target. So as it's a moving target, it can accommodate the current pandemic that we are in at the moment. It is an ad hoc basis. It's the view of the board. They know their constituency of members, the means that they've got, the contingency fee that they've got. If they've got quite a heavy contingency fee, they can absorb the reduction in the cash that will come in for a few 3-4 months, and then we'll borrow from it and replenish it back into the contingency fund in due course. Incidentally, the CSOS directive, which I've just referred to, has also set out some guidelines, and I want to emphasize it. It is guidelines, it's not the law. So our members can also go have a look at the CSOS directives, what they recommend can be done. Just so that you know, they recommend the suspension of late payment penalties, maybe a reduction in interest, all in a concerted effort to absorb this whole pandemic and the financial consequences.
So we have, this is a very big issue here in the United States, and with a lot of our members outside of the United States. So in the US association, we do have that contractual obligation. So residents have to pay their assessments. If they don't pay their assessments, an association may take collection action, file a lien, and even move forward to foreclosure. Many of our states have put a moratorium on foreclosure actions. CAI has released a statement encouraging associations to put a moratorium on foreclosure actions, on foreclosures specific to hardships related to the coronavirus. Even some of the associations have asked their legal counsel, their management, should they stop collecting assessments? And the answer is absolutely not, because we agree with what you said, that unemployment is going to be an issue, and that unemployment is going to create a hardship for people living in some of our community associations. So they won't be able to pay. But the key is making sure that the association is working with those individuals on payment plans, maybe releasing them from interest and other penalties, but working with them on a payment plan. Our associations have also, for the most part, not gone out and sent emails or mailings to residents saying, hey, if you're having a hard time paying your assessments, call us. Because that would just encourage people to stop paying their assessments. As we all know, the financial model of an estate, of an association, that financial model relies almost solely on those assessments. So maintaining those assessments, payment of those assessments is absolutely critical. One of the differences we have here in the US versus South Africa is the majority, at least 2/3 of associations, we estimate, may not use reserve funds for something like this. So they can only use their reserve funds for capital improvements, capital improvement projects. They can't use them for operating expenses caused from a pandemic or something of this sort. Now, I would guess that laws are going to change in the coming years related to this, giving boards some level of, or associations some level of flexibility in these types of circumstances, but otherwise, those funds are untouchable for operating funds. Tom, Phoebe, do you guys have anything to add? Johan?
Well, I mean, it obviously in the case, I mean, and for those familiar with terminology, reserve funds are the same as sinking funds. You know, if the law allows the board to have that flexibility to move the money, obviously this is a good time to use that flexibility. But the vast majority of states don't permit that. Once those monies have been moved into the sinking fund, that they have to be used for that purpose. Again, you know, in extremis, this may be an area where one can ask for forgiveness after the fact. If there is some emergency that the board needs to allocate some of that money for sanitation purposes, for example, and there's just no other options short of borrowing the money, then, you know, perhaps you have to do that and have a special resolution after the fact from the AGM to empower the board to do so retroactively. But it is a challenge in the U.S., and I think Dawn's right. I think we're gonna be pushing for changes to legislation in the coming years that give the boards in a true emergency, and basically if the emergency is something declared by the government, the board would have more flexibility in managing the funding that it already has in hand.
Yeah, you
So
covered most of it. I know most of our communities now who don't have the ability to access reserve funding are discussing how they're going to budget differently in the future now. So we're beginning to look at next steps, and hopefully we come up with good plans over the next few months for if this ever happens again, how to address this differently so our communities are in a better situation when it comes to funding.
One of the questions we just received is asking, in the US, are we able to quantify right now the percentage of associations that are seeing an impact on levies, on assessments being collected? Right now, we haven't. We actually are preparing a survey that we'll be sending out to our members. Anecdotally, we haven't heard. I think it's a little soon. My guess is at the end of April, early May, when those assessments are due, we're going to start seeing some delinquencies that we didn't see previously. So we're going to collect that data here in the US and throughout the world. So we'll be asking your associations too on your behalf to share that information so that we can get an idea of who's unable to pay their assessments or how associations are handling it.
Right, Dawn. I think it's a timing issue, really. We really didn't see unemployment in the U.S. start to explode till the latter half of really the last week in March and the first couple of weeks of April. At that point, the March, the April assessments, most of which had been paid at that point. When it's May 1st is when I think a lot of communities are going to see an increase in delinquencies, because folks now have been potentially out of work for more than a month, and are going to, individually, at their family level, are going to see the same kind of cash flow problem.
So Dawn, I just received a WhatsApp from one of the older, well-established estates in South Africa. 25% reduction in levy payments for the month of April. Yeah.
Wow,
so
that's huge.
It's a reality check, for all of us to realize that this is huge, and if I can't give you the name, but I mean, coming from this estate, it tells me something. 25%, it's massive. It's huge. That
is huge. We have another question that I'd like to ask. Is it recommended that expenses incurred due to COVID-19 be ring-fenced? I'm not sure what that means. Due to external factors over which the board do not have control. Does that question make sense to you guys?
Dawn, I'll have a stab at it. I don't foresee any estate manager in South Africa guiding the board on the budgeting process and what needs to be budgeted for. Did foresee the pandemic as we currently experience. If so, I lift my hat to them. But to answer that question, I think it will be well advised to ring fence that was expensed in respect of the pandemic, because it's out of budget. And with that, and to echo on what has just been discussed, it will take some good, proper, well deliberated, comprehensive financial management to steer a community out of this post the pandemic.
Yeah, Dawn, if I can have a go at it, one of the leading businessmen in South Africa said that this is not a pause of the economy, it's a reset. And when we get back, it's almost like the budget that we did last year, you tear it up, because there's no history, there's no projections. It's a new world when we get back there. But from a judiciary or duty of care point of view, I think it will be good to ring fence it and at least give your members an idea of what was spent and why it was spent.
Absolutely, and we're seeing the same thing. Really trying to take a look at the rest of this year's budget and then next year's budget and how things are going to change accordingly. One of the questions that has also come up is related to, and I know you guys don't have a lot of cases at this point, COVID-19 cases, but is related to if there's someone in the community who has been diagnosed with the virus, what are your estates doing? And especially some of the condominiums, the sectional title, what are they doing? Are they requiring self-quarantine? Do they have the authority to do that? Are they letting people know in the community, you know, so-and-so has the COVID-19? How is that being handled right now? Or is it too soon to say?
Dawn, it's kind of like a clash in the law at the moment in South Africa. One piece of legislation protects your information pertaining to your health status. And the regulations, which is born from a stronger piece of legislation, now places upon you an obligation, irrespective of your will, to go for treatment if you are diagnosed with the virus. So in that backdrop, I think community managers and executives will be well guided that if a member is identified and that being positive with the virus, to approach him and say, can we have your consent in writing that we disclose this to the community? Because those people that you have been in contact with needs to be notified. Service providers have been access to your property, your domestics, etc. They also need to now be tested, etc. In a few of the estates for which I provide legal services, there has been reports, and fortunately those members were prepared to come forward, expose that they have been tested positive, and the process and the procedures ran from there. If a member is reluctant, does not wish to disclose the test of positive of the virus, then a community communication should just go out that we have indeed amongst us a positive tested member, and we'll need to deal it with as per the legislation. Luckily, a person can be brought before the authorities, whereby the authorities can then order him to be taken for treatment. So there's many ways of dealing with that dilemma.
Tom, do you want to talk about how we handle it here?
I'm not sure that there's a consistent answer for it at all.
I think one consistent piece is
we have a very strict federal law that protects the privacy of health information. And at the same time, I see associations sending out information that someone in the community has been diagnosed, and all that does is generate more questions, because they're obviously not telling people who that person is. They can't release that information. They're not even giving, you know, it's someone who lives on the 5th floor of this particular building. So, you know, all that does is create, I think, more anxiety sometimes within the community. Is the person I'm getting on the elevator with, on the lift with, that person they were talking about in the email they sent around? And should I wait and take, you know, take the stairs? There's no great solution to this, and I think it just ramps up the anxiety level in a lot of ways.
Dawn, sorry for the interruption. I think the answer lies in this, more to profess amongst your community that it is a moral obligation to come out and say that I've been tested positive. It's based on a moral obligation. Then everybody knows and everybody can deal with it.
So I'll say the experiences that we've seen, and again, this is anecdotal, the experiences we've seen is community associations may share, if asked, if there's anyone in the community who has been diagnosed with the virus. We have local for our towns and cities and state health departments. And so our communities rely on those health departments to enforce anything related to getting treatment or isolation, self-quarantine, what have you. I have not heard of any association share the name of an individual or the location of an individual who has been tested positive. I think we've seen a lot of respect and moral respect around the communities of people self-isolating and staying in their home and away from others, even staying in their one room in their home. So and also the law that Tom refers to, the protection of medical records, it's been most of the attorneys who work in the community association practice area don't believe that protects an individual from their community association telling. So it doesn't apply to community associations. It only applies to that medical record and that relationship between a medical professional and that individual. So while there is potentially a moral obligation for that individual to share the information, the associations aren't asking for that information. They're not asking for people to share and then disclose who that individual is. It's more self-quarantine that is being encouraged. Phoebe, do we have other questions?
Yeah, we just received a question about rental relief. If a company rents property from an association, are you seeing any rental relief to these companies that are closed right now?
So at my community where I'm at the moment, remember there's a golf course and a golf club. So there's food and beverage, there's a creche, there's a hair salon, there's a spa, there's a golf coach, there's TrueFit. So it is a challenge because on the one hand, we ask for discounts from suppliers, and on the other hand, the rentals ask. So our approach, we haven't formalized it, will probably be is to charge it because we still got overheads, but give them an opportunity to pay it off over a period of time. We haven't formalized the policy yet, but that's probably where we will go towards, because ultimately the knock-on effect for us, because in this case we're a landlord, will be to staff, and those kind of things. So we're trying to get a fine balance between everybody. For those contracts who was on a turnover, in some months it's good, some months it's bad. Now it's bad because the restaurant generates no revenue for us. So the fix, some cases now better than on a turnover, but it's a minefield, because I had cases at a corporate park where the guys just wrote me a letter and say, the president said I don't need to pay rates, I don't need to pay tax, I don't need to pay electricity, including my levy, so I'm not going to pay you. So, well, it doesn't work like that, so it is a bit of a minefield at the moment.
Phoebe, the only legal remedy that has been suspended in the South African law is evictions. They have been put on hold in respect of landlord-tenant scenarios. For the other ones, if the parties had the wisdom to contract when they negotiated and settled the deal to deal with pandemics, then the provisions of the agreement needs to be followed. And normally, it's a suspension of obligations for a certain time period, and if the pandemic persists, then there's a termination. If not, the default position is the common law, and the common law has crystallized over the time in our law that the court looks objectively to subjective circumstances to find whether there's an excuse from meeting the obligations in terms of the agreement until the pandemic has passed. But they are, when I say objective or subjective circumstances, there's not a fixed list, a clear list as we speak. So one needs to really go into the nuts and bolts of the contractual relationship before you can give a clear answer.
We have one more question, and then I want to share a video with the group that CAI put together to honor the boards of directors and managers of community associations around the world. So let's do our one last question, which is, how are estates handling enforcing covenants, enforcing rules during this time? And I can share some examples of what we're dealing with here in the US. People have been putting up holiday lights to make people happy because it makes them happy. And of course, a lot of associations have restrictions on when holiday lights can be displayed. And associations have been relaxed and compassionate in enforcing those types of covenants. So how is that working in South Africa related to covenant enforcement?
Dawn, you can only regulate what your constitution allows you to regulate. And the way that you regulate that is via the rules of the estate or the regulations. So if the regulation wishes to trickle down to the estate level, then the board will be well guided to first adopt a rule and make it legally enforceable before they can impose it. So to answer you, they may have a blood nose in court to go and usurp the authorities' empowerments as given by the regulations. So, but if they do wish to regulate it, then first adopt the rule, get it legally enforceable, and then let the process follow.
So do you have rules like rules related to like holiday lights, or here's a big one we have here in the US, RV parking, trailer parking? Do you have those types of rules in your estates?
Yes, yes, indeed.
And so is there flexibility now on those rules as people are challenged with kind of meeting some of those rules or breaking some of those rules because they're trying to do good for the community?
So the majority of our rules, as you know, is the people, pets, and parking. So no issue with pets because they're not allowed to walk their pets outside. Makes it easier. From where I sit, Dawn, is the noise pollution is the one that we police in terms of in the evenings where the guys makes excessive noise. But where there's trailers parked in driveways and maybe cars parked in the driveways, no, not at this stage. I'm trying to show compassion. That I think is the key word, is to show compassion. And so I say it depends for me. The noise is something different, especially with we had quite a number of coronavirus parties the night before lockdown. People were getting together, yeah. Noise pollution that you cannot believe, until 2 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. Trying to drink the coronavirus away and all those kind of things. Yeah, it's crazy. But that we police with security, but with the trailers parked and no more dogs, those kind of things, it's not an issue. But try and show compassion. Show compassion.
Yeah.
Dawn, your board and management needs to be alive and sensitive to the demands, expectations, and the lay of the land of the community. So if fairy lights or holiday lights, as you call them, do pick up the atmosphere in the estate, I think that they need to apply their minds to have a relaxation on the rule, or to suspend it for the moment, or to vary that rule.
Right, agreed.
Dawn, I had one other question, and that is, have you had issues arise with if you have healthcare professionals who are living in your community? So doctors, nurses, emergency room folk, department people. Have you had any pushback from other residents about concerns of them bringing home the infection?
I haven't at my communities that I'm involved in pushback, but
Mhm.
I had some scenarios, one where a lady was doing more alternative healthcare. And I said to her, well, you're not registered as essential service provider, so I can't assist you. And then I had cases where the guy was providing medical care and somebody needs to come and look after his animals. And again, we showed compassion. I said, yes, we will allow that because somebody needs to come and look after your animals while you're doing an essential service. Not in my communities that much. I was challenged today by email from a resident to say, how can we stop domestic workers and gardeners, but we allow security? You know, so that fine, but I still need to answer that email. I'll probably do it tomorrow. But I think also what happens is the longer it carries on, Tom, that's the other thing. You know, the first week it was fine, then it gets a bit more. But now, if they extend it after the 30th, tomorrow night, I think more of these things will come to the fore because people are getting more agitated. You know,
Yeah.
our schools are closed. So, you know, and that's the other challenge. You know, suddenly a working mom sits at home with 3 kids and she's got a homeschool, she's got a day job from, you know, dad can sit in the, you know, do his job, but it's a challenge. And I think the longer it continues, it's going to come more to the fore.
Agreed. And what we're seeing here is people are really charging the state legislative houses and saying, we need to stop this, stop the stay-at-home order. We need to be free. We need to be able to go about our regular business. So we are starting to see that people getting really frustrated with having to stay at home. But of course, at the same time, we have medical professionals, world-renowned medical professionals saying stay at home and stop the spread of this terrible virus.
Well, and, you know, in the US at least, you know, we have 45,000 dead Americans so far. And I mean, we're a big country and you know, I get that, but at the same time, that's, you know, that's an astronomical number. I mean, for the month of April, COVID will be the leading cause of death in the United States, more than heart disease, cancer, car wrecks, anything else you can imagine. And that's a huge impact. And, you know, people need to take it seriously. I mean, this is not, you know, this is not the flu. This is not a joke. This is very, very serious. And, you know, you all in South Africa have had the advantage, and I don't know if it's an advantage, but you've had a much stricter national lockdown than we've seen here in the United States. Our lockdown has been state by state. Some states have been very, very strict. Some have been very liberal. You know, it's been all over the map in terms of what the effectiveness of it is. And, you know, we'll have one state that says only essential workers are allowed to be out of their homes, and then another state that says no events over 10 people, except you're allowed to have church services of 1,000. You know, and so you've defeated the purpose of the lockdown, you know, very quickly. So I think people, I get they're getting tired of being at home. I get that it's stressful. I get that maybe running out of wine in the wine cabinet. But at the same time, this is literally, how often have we ever faced an issue in our industry, in the states, in communities, that is literally a life or death issue? And that is what we are facing. And we need to remind our residents and our boards and our members about that on a regular basis. This is not, did someone cut their lawn the way they're supposed to, or paint the house the wrong color, or put up their fairy lights when they shouldn't have. This is literally people's life and death. And we're not used to dealing with that in communities. And we have to remind ourselves of the import of that on a regular basis, and remind our boards that.
So I'd like to share.
I agree with you, Tom. You know, and it's still summer.
Go ahead, Johan.
No, it's just it's still summer in South Africa. You know, so it's and we haven't seen the numbers of people dying that the rest of the world, and that's the scary part still coming for us. You know, in the next 3 months. But thank you.
So I'd like to share this video, and then I would like to give Johan, AJ, Tom, I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to make some closing comments when we're done. So let me share this video, and then we will go to closing comments and let everybody enjoy their dinner with their families. So I think together as an organization, as an industry, we'll get through this, obviously. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you so much for being with us. Johan, AJ, Tom, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with everyone on the call today. And I will let you guys make your closing comments. I'll start with you, Johan.
Dawn, thank you, and thank you for you and Tom and for Phoebe, and it was great to see you guys again and talk. Just two things for me. One is maybe it's an opportunity to learn yourself or teach yourself a life skill. I'm trying to teach myself how to type with two hands, not two fingers. And I think it's for communities time to care and reach out. We should not be on the front pages about walking dogs and running and all, trying to use the common areas. There's many poor communities around us, and it's time to reach out and show that we really care for our community. And thank you for you, and good luck.
Same to you. AJ?
Dawn, thank you. And thank you for the invitation, and good to see you guys again. This is not a blip. This is not a blip. Just maybe spend 10, 15 minutes tonight and think of the consequences of this pandemic worldwide, not South Africa, not the States, worldwide. And then on each consequence of it, what's going to be the plan of action? And then reach out. The professionals, the guy next door at the other association, share notes. If we don't have an answer, we'll find an answer. And thanks again for the invitation.
Thanks for participating. Great to see you. Tom?
As I said, this is literally, life and death, and something we're not used to facing in our industry for the most part. But I keep thinking back over the last couple of weeks to Sir Winston Churchill's speech in 1940 as the Blitz was going on in London. And he talked about this being our biggest challenge, but also the potential for it being our finest hour. And I look at what managers are doing around the world. I look at what community association boards are doing around the world. I look at how residents are supporting one another and helping one another. And it has the potential to be the biggest challenge we ever face and our finest hour. And those aren't mutually exclusive.
I love that. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. Please stay healthy and stay well, and we will all keep in touch. I'm going to end the broadcast for now. Johan, AJ, Tom, Phoebe, thank you so much. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. And again, stay healthy and well.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.